Melissa Janis, the woman with two first names, welcome. It is good to see you. And I know I could probably spend the entire episode talking about what it's like to have two first names, but our listeners may find it more interesting to talk about your expertise and work in leadership development. So, welcome, Melissa.
Great. What a lovely introduction, Gary. Let's talk about people who have colors for last names.
I will tell you that I'm obligated to make magenta my favorite color and to make magenta your favorite color as well.
I'm a big purple fan, so it's not a
Thank you.
stretch.
Well, every time we talk, I am just taken by how passionate you are about leadership development and frontline leadership development specifically. And we were speaking a couple of weeks ago when you were introducing me to your new ebook, 7 Reasons Why Your New Manager May Be at Risk and What You Can Do About It. And I thought there's some sort of calling here for you. You are brought to this work by, in my impression, almost a higher calling. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'll start with a little fun fact. Early in my career, I was the 8th employee at Discover Card.
Oh, wow.
I was number 8.
Wow.
And I was brought on at a very young age to sign all of the major US airlines and car rental companies to accept the Discover Card. And you can imagine that was a big remit, and I was very focused on getting the job done. And I did. I'm proud to report, I was the first national accounts manager to sign my entire portfolio.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. And so I have a beautiful trophy sitting in my living room. I also have a bucket load full of guilt because I did not go to management training. And I was a horrible first-time manager.
We have so much in common. I can't wait to dig into that.
Right? And so I came to this very honestly. I fell into that major first-time pitfall that the demands of the job were so important that I couldn't take the time to make sure I was going to be a good people leader.
So may I just share a similar story with you for a second?
Please.
Was in my early 30s before I ever worked for somebody else. I was a young entrepreneur. Prior to that, I had worked in family businesses, but I was 33 years old before I got my first corporate job, and it was after I sold my business. And I recognized pretty quickly that I had the world's worst manager. I had never really had a manager before, but I knew that I had the world's worst manager. Very nice guy, great individual contributor, but not a manager. And as I was maligning him and criticizing him and voodoo doll pin sticking him, I finally had to ask myself, well, what kind of manager was I? When I was in business for myself in my 20s and early 30s, I had over 50 employees. And when I really analyzed what I didn't like about my leader's management style, and I had to ask myself the question, what kind of leader were you? I realized I was not only a bad leader, I was worse than he was. And when I wrote my first book, The Unbossy Boss, about frontline managers, I wrote an apology letter in that book to anybody who had ever worked for me as a first-time leader, because I felt that bucket of guilt that you do. You and I need to have a book group over this.
There you go. Well, I actually posted on LinkedIn maybe 2 weeks ago my apology note. There's a big post that just says sorry. And it starts with, I'm sorry, Judith. And I should have named the others, but there you go. So it's sort of either ironic or perhaps poetic justice that in this home stretch of my career, I've decided to tackle that and help people and come up with a solution for people who are in really high stakes situations while they're making that leap to new manager and helping them succeed both on the task side and the people management side simultaneously, because it's not one or the other. It's got to be both.
It's interesting you said that, because what I was thinking was you were very proud in the way you said you reached your goals. You're young, it's a new company, you're new, and you knocked it out of the park in one dimension.
Right.
And that is so often the case with frontline leaders. They're good at the task, but they're not great at the people piece. So tell us a little bit. You mentioned sort of that first pitfall that you encountered. What are some of the other
Mhm.
pitfalls that you see out there with first time leaders?
Yeah, so it's interesting when you and I had talked about challenges and pitfalls. Reflecting on that, I think there's a distinction to be made. So hear me out because I'm curious on how you might think about this. Challenges to me are the things that new managers encounter as they move from individual contributor to new manager. By virtue of the change in role and authority, there were challenges that they naturally encounter, right? So they encounter the need for leadership skills because they didn't need them before and now they need
For sure.
them. They encounter the need to um, manage peers,
And friends.
right? Or their friends, right? And all of a sudden they need to figure out how to delegate to people who were their buddies, manage their performance. When you're an individual contributor and change comes down the pike from leadership, you get to complain at the water cooler. And now, as a new manager, you need to toe the line. You even need to figure out how to get the team on
Well, now as the
board.
new manager, they're talking about you at the water cooler.
Yeah, well, that too, right? And so that shift creates challenges that are really common to everyone who goes through those experiences. What I sort of teased out in the ebook were the pitfalls that people encounter that put them at risk for not managing those challenges well. So, if that makes
So say that
sense.
again for us.
Yeah. So, the pitfalls that new managers experience are the things that put them at risk so they aren't able to navigate those challenges. So let me give you an
Please.
example. The new manager needs leadership skills, right? They realize that the challenge is they now need leadership skills and skills that they did not have as a technical leader. The pitfall is not providing them with the
So
training.
it's interesting that you said that because there's an expression I use, which is um, managers are the chief engagement officers for their team, and most of them are failing. And it's not their fault, exclamation mark. Why is it not their fault? I think it's what you just said. They have leaders or organizations that aren't preparing them, and they don't know
Yeah.
what they don't know. How do I know
Yes,
what I need when I go into
absolutely.
this role? And I think we expect and even trust that our organization is going to set us up for success. And I don't think the
Hmm.
organizations are trying to get it wrong. Nobody wakes up in the morning trying to get it wrong.
Right.
But they are assuming that just because you are the most productive individual contributor, that
Hmm.
means you'll naturally know how to lead others. And it's not
Yeah.
always the case. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think there's a halo effect there, right? Particularly for that top performer. The top performer um, is particularly susceptible to the pitfall because what worked for them before, they're going to keep doing that. But the double whammy is because they're the top performer, as you suggest, the leadership says they're great, they've
Of
got
course
it.
they're going to be great at this. The pitfall, that the way I look at the pitfall is when you're an individual contributor, you're responsible for bringing out the best in yourself. When you're a leader,
Right.
you're responsible for bringing out the best in others. And those are different
Hmm.
skills.
Totally different. Totally different. And so, what you're really speaking to is one of my big pet peeves.
Say more.
So much. I mean, there's so much out there for new managers, right? You can throw a rock and hit advice for a new manager. It's everywhere, right? I didn't bother Googling it, but I'm sure it's like a gazillion hits if you put in tips for new
At the
managers.
least.
And right. And so my pet peeve is that when you see these tips for new managers, they are almost always directed at the new manager. Do this, don't do that, right? 5 no-nos for new bosses. It's always really pithy, but it's usually this like laundry list of things they should do and things they should avoid, as if it's completely their responsibility to learn and change their behavior and adapt
On their own.
to their new
On their
role
own.
on their
Learn
own,
this
right?
independently.
Exactly. When it's really a shared responsibility between the new manager, their supervisor, and the organization.
This is why I love talking to you, Melissa Janis,
Oh,
because we are of one brain on this. It is a shared responsibility. I do, as a frontline leader, need to think about, work on, even research independently what I need to do to be successful, create that plan. And there is an expectation that I will have the leaders of leaders really help set me up for success. And if you think about that partnership, what do you see as the leadership traits or qualities that our organizations should be helping our frontline leaders build? What do they need to be successful?
oh, that's such a great question. They need a lot. Um, they need, first of all, new managers need to feel supported. It's incredibly overwhelming, and it can be very stressful for the new manager. And so if they're not in a psychologically safe environment where they feel that they have support, what people typically do is default to their dominant response, right? So we go back to the habit or the thing that usually works for us. And the problem is the new manager is in an entirely new situation. So the dominant response is unlikely to be the right answer. It might be, but it might not be. And so they're actually doubling down on the wrong behavior rather than being open to modifying it or adopting a new way of doing things. One of the other things that I've been hearing and talking a lot about lately is this notion of humility. You know, people get promoted because they're really good at what they do,
Yes.
and and you're supposed to now have the answers if you're the
Oh, well,
boss.
the badge says it, right? Because I have the badge that says manager is a little osmosis machine, and it just gives me all the right answers just by pinning that on my white shirt. I have all of the
Yeah,
answers overnight. It's
like,
incredible what that badge does for us.
right? You're the shell answer man. And so um, the challenge is that in this environment, in this world of fast-paced change, the right answer today, good chance it's not the right answer to tomorrow, or maybe at least the day after.
For sure.
And so approaching, and this is for leaders at all levels, approaching problems with an open mindset, creating working hypotheses and validating those is really, really important, right? But particularly for the new manager who is entering into the role and has this incredible overwhelming need to show that they deserve the role, right? And want to leverage their formal authority, the likelihood is they are going to start being directive too early
Because
when they don't know
they now
yet.
believe they need to have the answer.
Correct.
They feel like they need to have all the answer. Yeah. So because I have the manager badge on, oftentimes tell me if you disagree, Melissa. Oftentimes I feel like I now need to have all of the answers. And in reality, I think that managers have to have the questions, not the answers.
Yes. 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 Key takeaway. The managers need to have great questions. And I would say if there was one hack I could offer leaders at all levels, is to get really, really good at asking insightful, open-ended questions. It's like a magic cure-all.
All right, so let's
So,
just help people. The idea of open-ended
mhm,
questions, I know there's some common
mhm.
definitions, but insightful and open-ended questions, either can you give us an example of one, or what? How do we really define insightful and open-ended?
Ah, so it's hard to define one out of context. So let me just say that it's a question that starts with what or how that gets people to think.
That's I love that. I'm going to steal it. I'm writing it down right now. It's now my definition.
Great.
I'm sure Marion Webster is writing it down as well. What or
Mm,
how? And what I love what you just said, and I think will be helpful for others, is the purpose
mhm.
of it is to get the other person to think. And then if I
Yes.
extrapolate that, is it right to assume and get them to be an active participant in a solution together?
Yes, if the purpose is performance management, if the purpose is to build consensus,
Well, how about solving business
um,
problems?
yeah, I mean, really what you're trying to do is use it to elicit great information from somebody else and work together collaboratively to solve either a performance issue,
Yeah.
business issue, or whatever. But I'm hedging my bet because just yesterday a client had said to me that she had gotten feedback that she needs to speak up more in meetings. And she's new to the table. She's a new senior leader. And she was uncomfortable contributing because her notion of contributing was that she had to give answers. She had to give information. And so I said, gee, what would happen if you asked a thoughtful question?
It is the secret. It's interesting because the way I term it, I love that. The way I term it is powerful question. And I look at
Yes.
a powerful question as, it's always respectful. You're not
Mhm.
trying to denigrate or catch somebody with your question, right? So it's respect.
Correct.
It's
Good
good
intent.
intent and open-ended, as you said. Thought-provoking, I keep as a separate category. So respectful, open-ended, and thought-provoking.
Mhm.
And I think you're right. Senior leaders have this same, let's just call it imposter syndrome that frontline leaders have, which is, oh, I'm in this spot. I've got to prove my worth in this spot. So I have to come up with
Mhm.
the answers. And I think that describes yesterday's leader. Today's leader or
Yes.
tomorrow's leader says, I have to ask the right questions to make sure we understand the perspective of the many, get as much information to the table,
Mhm.
and as a leader, work as a partner, a facilitator to get to the right answer for the person or the business or the problem at hand.
And I love how you wove diversity into that answer,
Oh, I didn't realize I did that.
right?
So cool.
You
I'm much
did.
smarter and
You did
better looking
because
than I give myself credit for.
I give you lots of credit for both.
So tell me what you mean by how I wove diversity in there.
Well, because it's about having lots of lenses. When you don't have the right answer, when you don't know what's coming down the pike, right? We're all trying to, in a world of fast-paced change, we're all trying to look out and try to seeing around corners. Let me say that again. In a world of fast-paced change, we're all trying to see what's coming from around the corner,
Yes.
right? We don't know. And so if you look at it with only your lens, right, it's pretty hard to see around the
Of course,
corner.
it's one dimensional. We need to be in a three-dimensional
Exactly.
world here for sure.
Perfect. So the more that we're asking other people for their input, it doesn't mean we have to take it on board. But, it's sort of like having those mirrors at the end of a difficult driveway. You can see around the corner because somebody else is giving you the benefit of that
For sure.
perspective.
We're talking quite a bit about the pitfalls of new leaders and what leaders, even at every level, are up against. And it causes me to think, well, once we get past that difficult um, eh, eh, first 6 months, 3 months, 6 months,
Mhm.
9 months, 12 months, what is the ongoing leadership development that's needed? What do these frontline managers who manage to get through that first period of
Mhm.
time, what do they need moving forward?
That's such a great question because I think that the obstacle that I've seen for different people varies, right? It has to do with kind of what they bring to the table. And we tend to talk about management training in particular. It's very foundational. Everybody needs the same things. But one of the things that I found in the ebook was that people come with different tendencies, and so which are the ones that are being addressed?
So when you say tendencies,
The ones that
is that
aren't, yeah.
leadership
So the ones,
style, attributes, leadership traits?
um, yeah, that's a good question. So let me give you an example. Um, One of the things that I love when research proves what we kind of know anecdotally. So this doesn't sound like a shocker, but it was kind of interesting to find the data on it. Um, People who have STEM degrees and business degrees are better at business kinds of tasks in their job. So they're better at business problem solving and analytics, for
Sure, makes
example.
sense.
And shockingly, people who have degrees in the humanities are better at interaction based skills, right? So, if you appreciate that the course of study actually sets in motion certain kinds of strengths and potential pitfalls down the road, and the managers, if they had the good fortune to go to a foundational program, and by the way, only 40% of them do.
When you say foundational program, foundational leadership development program? Yes.
Yes. Like management training. You're getting promoted and now you're getting the benefit of some management training. 40% of them get management training. Some good portion of them, I would say, let me say it differently. On average, they don't get the training until they're 4 years into the role.
Till it's almost they stubbed their toes too many times.
That their foot's broken. I mean, it's 4 years later.
They're on crutches.
So let's say they had training, it was timely, it was relevant, and it was effective. That's a pretty small portion of people, but let's just say they had that. When they go through the program, they've gone through a generic training program.
Not personalized for them and their skills, their skill base.
Exactly. So the person who graduated from a business program or a STEM program, well, let's talk in great generalities, is more likely to be the person who doesn't schedule weekly one-to-ones with their team.
Yeah, you're speaking to the really, you need EQ and IQ to be a leader in today's world.
Yeah.
And it's interesting on that. I love the conversation here, because when I think about our frontline leaders, even leaders just above them, they're largely responsible for being the conduit for the organization's purpose, strategy, culture. And for all three of those things, you need both the EQ and the IQ.
Yes.
Now, so I think the important question here, while we're talking about the ongoing development of leaders, is if you are more inclined to be a technical leader versus a human experience leader, or you're more inclined the other way around, are these skills capabilities that we can learn? I mean, if I'm just not naturally a people person, can I learn how to be? And if I'm not naturally strategic, can I learn how to be?
So, having spent almost 30 decades in learning and development, I'm going to say yes.
Can you say 3 decades? Because 30 decades makes you 300.
I say 30. Yeah, I mean, it's really young. I'm sorry. Can I say that? Can I say that again? I need to say that again.
You should leave it just like that.
No, it just feels like so long. No, having spent 3 decades in learning and development, I'm going to say yes, right? Everybody can learn. Now, is somebody who's really reluctant to meet with their team going to meet as frequently as somebody who thrives on that? No. Maybe they don't need to because they're in a technical role and their people are less interested. They're more task focused. So it's very situational. I think the answer is everybody needs to have one-to-ones with their direct reports, but the length of those meetings...
I'm sorry to cut you off on this, but it is the question that I get so often. How often?
I think it depends. I think it depends on what the team needs, what each individual person needs. On average, and I should also say the size of the team. There's some pragmatic aspect to this. One of my clients has 25 people that he's managing directly at this moment.
Twice a week, right?
Absolutely. So yesterday we talked about a rolling plan, right? I had a small team, so I met with them once a week. They had their hour. And by the way, I think more important than how frequently, I think it's about who owns the meeting.
And so before we get to that, because I want you to tell us the secret to who owns the meeting, I just want to affirm how much I love it depends, because there are people who will put once a week, once a month, whatever it may be, for an hour with each person, when one
Mm-hmm.
person actually needs to talk to you every morning for 5 minutes for a couple of weeks to get their house in
Yes.
order, and somebody else doesn't need to
Yes.
talk to you till next month. And it's okay to treat each
Mm-hmm.
of these people as an individual. So I loved your answer. It depends. If you're listening to this episode, it depends. Let's think about
Yes.
each individual and what they need, and it's okay to ask them, what do you need?
Yes. Ask them. And in fact, I mean, if you think about it, if you have more than one child,
Yes.
right, you know the answer
The
to
answer
this.
to it,
You give
yes.
each child what they need, but it's not necessarily the same thing. I have one child who is very into technology. He got tech equipment. The other one is interested in music and business. He got some tech equipment because he needed it, but he needed it because he was composing music.
Yes.
So he needed software, not hardware, right? And so we need to give each person on the team what they need when they need it and being flexible with that. Because even though there might be somebody on the team that's very skilled, very independent, needs a long leash, right? Just let them go do their thing. And, a half an hour once a month is okay with them. Checking in with them and validating that on an ongoing basis. This is still working for
Yes.
you because they may have a need that comes up and may not feel they have the permission to
Right. It's not
change
my
the
not my
paradigm.
allotted time, so I have to hold it. That's sort of the
Yeah,
world doesn't work that way, right? You certainly wouldn't tell a loved one, "Hey, you've got a problem, but we're not meeting till next month at 4:15 on Sunday for dinner," right? No,
great example.
yeah, well, that's the way I think about business, right? It's one big dysfunctional family, and our jobs as
Mm,
managers is to change the communication. You
yeah,
you said something again. Everything you say is intriguing to me. You said you made a comment about, well, who owns the meeting? So I'm at
yeah.
the edge of my seat. Who owns the meeting and why and how?
Well, I'm just loving this. I believe that the employee owns the meeting.
Preach.
Okay, so here's the thing, right? We're accustomed in that command and control world that we grew up in, that the leader tells us, our manager says, we're having a meeting and you show up and you get done to. The meeting is done to you. Um, and then if you're lucky, you might have time at the end for the questions that you're asking. In today's world, it's all about engaging your employees and helping them take the ball and run with it. So we don't want people to do what we ask of them anymore. We want them to go above and beyond. And the only way that's going to happen is if they're really genuinely empowered. So why not start with the one to one and say, that's your time with me. You want an hour once a week, or you feel you need a half an hour every other week? That's fine, right? Come to me with, and then set really clear expectations. I'm going to want to be interested in what your employee experience is like. So, how's it going for you? Is there anything going on in your life I need to
In your
know
life
about?
outside of this office, you
Yeah.
need to
Oh,
know about. Yes.
outside. Yeah. Like, forget that big ass boundary that there used to be. We can't ask anything personal.
Oh, that's
This
yeah.
is all about caring and coaching.
Yesterday's world, we are our employees are one person. They can't separate the
Yeah.
fact that they're dealing with elder care from
Mhm.
coming into the office and dealing with the day to day there. They are one person. They're dealing with all of it, we have to be in flow with them. Uh, that
Exactly. Compartmentalizing
doesn't
doesn't help
help. Doesn't
anybody.
help. We have to really be managing the whole person, leading the whole person. If we get to this sort of very technical piece of who owns the meeting, I know that when I
Mhm.
work with my executive coachees, I go as far as to say, you need to send the calendar invite. It's your meeting,
Yes.
it's going to be
Yes.
your agenda, and it's going to be your invite. I'm not coaching you because your boss wants me to. I'm coaching you because we're working on your career together or whatever the topic may
Mhm.
be. So you own that.
Yes. I think who owns the meeting sends the
I
invite
I
for
know it's
sure.
minor, but to me it may seem minor, but to me it's an important detail. If you set the meeting time and you're coming with the preliminary agenda, it can might go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You have more skin in the game to show up and
Yes.
fully engage. And
Mm-hmm.
you said we need people to go above and beyond. Fully engaged means bringing your discretionary effort to the
Yes.
workplace. And we can't do that if we're passive. So as
Mm-hmm.
leaders, sort of this chapter of our conversation, Melissa, I think could be really helpful for people in that we have to give our employees what it is they want and need when they need it. They have to be a full participant. We're not doing this to them. As frontline leaders at every level, our employees should be coming to us with what's most important. So let them set the agenda, own the meeting, and go as far as to having them schedule it.
Mm-hmm. And then tying back to an earlier part of our conversation, because the employees are doing the telling, that's the opportunity for the manager to be asking those insightful, open-ended questions.
Powerful questions for sure.
Right? Powerful questions saying, okay, so how is it going? What obstacles are you encountering? And by the way, how can I help
Yes.
you?
Well, so let's talk about that one for a minute. How can I help you? There are some employees who don't know how to answer that. They don't want to either
Mm.
seem like they're incapable or they're too needy or they don't want to impose. What are the ways we can ask people how we can help them that will elicit the best responses?
So one is to leverage the problem that they stated, right? So they're opening that door and saying, I'm having difficulty getting approval from another department.
So the manager can go back and say, what I heard you say is you're having difficulty here with this
Mm-hmm.
relationship or this task.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do specifically to help you accomplish that goal?
Right. So making it narrower, right? So that it's more specific. I'm also a huge fan of choice. And so this is an opportunity for choice. So rather than, and I think you and I are aligned in our thinking, we don't want to give the answer if we don't
Correct.
have to, right? Because we could just say, well, why don't I call my buddy who runs that department and take care of it
I'm
for
gonna pave
you?
the road. You just go walk down it. Yeah.
There you go. Love that. Oh, you're so pithy. So So instead, I might offer, here are some solutions I've seen other people use. Would any of these work for you or any of these appealing? And kind of opening up with it could be this or that. And then they're still choosing
It's the br-
something. So they still have that skin in
it
the
is the
game.
brainstorming part of any uh, coaching session you're having with an employee.
Yeah.
And so I love that, offering solutions, giving choices. And it's somewhat for those of us who have had little ones in our life, whether they're children or nieces or nephews or friends' children. Would you like to go to your room for the rest of your life, or would you like to pick up your toys? It's sort of giving choices that people can pick from, right? So we're giving
Right.
choices, but it's interesting from a leadership standpoint. You talked up front about leaders feeling like they needed to have the answer to be their pitfall could be that they're
Mm-hmm.
too directive. When you think about that, the choices that we can give, I have a visual image as a people leader that we need to sit next to, not across from,
Yeah.
not standing over, next to that employee, that coachee, and do exactly that brainstorming, that choices. Well, let's talk about what the choices might be. Let's brainstorm a couple of scenarios
Mm-hmm.
here and see what sticks. It's not about you having to have the answer. It's not about them having to have the answer, but collectively, if that employee can see you as a manager, as their
Mm-hmm.
partner in problem solving, then they're going to come to you all the time to work
Right.
on really meaty topics.
Yes. And so what I loved about what you just said and that imagery of sitting next to them, your language accompanied that. You used uniting language. Let's talk about it. There was a lot of let's that preceded or started all of your comments. And so you're basically constantly reinforcing a collaboration. We're doing this together. This notion of bring me problems, don't bring me
Bring me
problems, bring me
solution.
solutions. like talk about yesterday's management. We don't want that anymore. We want people to bring us their problems and talk about it together, because you know what? They also need our lens, right? We need multiple lenses to solve problems together. So it's great. I want you to be thinking about it. And if you have some ideas when you come to the table, that's wonderful. But it's equally okay to come with your hands up going, I don't know what to do with this one. I've already tried X, Y, and
Yes.
Z. What do I
Yes.
do?
What do I do? And then together, if the two of you don't have the answer, then we start to think about, well, who else can we bring into this conversation? And that
Correct.
collaborative approach is, you mentioned diversity before, you're getting diversity of thought in there, is really problem solving. And as
Yes.
managers, I believe one of our key jobs is that we are problem solving with our team. And that's a
Mhm.
two-way street. They're coming to me to help solve problems. And if I'm really a good leader of others, I'm going to them and being vulnerable and saying, hey, we've got something we have to figure out for the organization here. I don't have all the answers. I want your input.
Mhm. So I love that you picked up on vulnerability there, because one of the things that I think gets in people's way when they want to transition to a more humanistic approach and show care or humility and ask questions rather than telling, there's, for some people, there's a vulnerability that they think that the leaders senior to them will see them as weak, or maybe even their direct reports, because they're in a command and control environment, they'll see them as weak. I've seen this in certain industries, and I've seen this in certain intercultural um, communications, because in certain countries that are very hierarchical, it's not appropriate to be asking questions. If you're senior, you should be telling. And so when you work in a, or you live in a country that has high power distance, it's not okay to be asking
Yes.
questions. But you work for a company in, you know, like that's based in the United States, you have two sets of standards that you need to adhere to, and it can be really
It can be
challenging for
challenging.
them.
There are people in my orbit who do work for a leader that is very dictatorial and expects them
Mm-hmm.
to be the same. And
Yeah.
my question oftentimes to them is, well, we can be part of the change. We can,
Yeah.
do you want to be part of the change? Can you help affect change and move that dynamic forward? Um,
Mm-hmm.
do you want to succumb to that and take that control and command approach? Is this the right place for you? These are sort of the questions
Yeah.
we start to ask, because there are organizations out there that are still operating in what I refer to as 1950s management, which was
Mm-hmm.
yell and tell, control and command, domination. For me, I know that doesn't work for me. I don't even want to
Right.
work with, as a client, an organization that has that.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, I think it's fair to share with listeners that there are organizations where it's tough. You may be the lone person out,
Mm-hmm.
being a leader that's vulnerable and asks questions versus what I refer to as yells and
Mm-hmm.
tells.
Right. And so it could be painful in the short term. I like to think that someone who takes that risk and really commits to it and delivers creates a team that creates buzz
Becomes
and
the tipping
starts
point,
to affect.
becomes the tipping point for the
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah, I think so.
You and I are fully aligned, and here's why I support that fully. Well, what's the worst case? The worst case is it doesn't work, it doesn't flush in your organization, and it's time to move on. We know
Mm.
that right up front. Today's manager does not necessarily want to live in a control and command environment. So I always encourage, well, let's be part of the change. Let's show our department and our team has a different
Hmm.
approach, and that there is a downstream positive impact with that approach, and bring others along until we hit the tipping point. And that, by the way, is possible. I see every
Hmm.
manager as a multiplier, and I see that multiplier effect going in two directions. You multiply your impact on everybody that reports to you. You have a direct report, you're impacting them and their families or loved ones, and you're impacting every customer or every other internal customer that they serve. You may have
Mm.
10 indirect reports, but you may influence 100 other employees and 10,000 customers if you extrapolate it out. On the other side, as a manager, when you are looking up in the business, you have an opportunity to multiply up by showing leaders of leaders there's a different way to do this. We can have an
Mm.
impact in a more Socratic style of management.
Mhm.
So there is a great sense of, I don't know if it's influence, ego, power, all of those that even a new frontline manager should feel, and the fact that they impact almost in a 360-degree way the lives
Mhm.
and thinking of others. And it's your choice in how you want to take that on. I think they have great opportunity. What I know from speaking to you over the time we've been getting to know each other and today is that you have indeed figured out a better way to help frontline and especially new managers to learn faster and accelerate their impact. And as we're drawing towards the end of our conversation, I wonder if you would just shed some light, give us a few of those secrets on how you are helping these new leaders get there faster and better.
I love the question. Thank you so much for the opportunity to answer that. Um, so it kind of goes back to what we were talking about the generic training and the one size fits all training. And so for leaders, particularly those who aren't going to be able to attend training or it's not available to them and they're in a high stakes situation, I wanted to come up with something that was pragmatic, that pull together theory and research and best practice in a way that could be really powerful for the people in that situation. And so I work with people one to one. So I consider myself not a coach, oddly, although I presume that by asking all my open ended power questions, I'm coaching a lot. But
Sounds,
I really
sounds very
conceptualize
coachy, Melissa. Very good.
it does, right? Um, but I consider myself a one to one personal trainer. And so I have a framework that accelerates learning and accelerates impact that my clients progress through, but it's flexible enough so that as we're working together, whatever challenges they're encountering, we address. And so I'm teaching in the moment rather than having somebody attend a generic training program.
So, Melissa, you're in a very special space in that you're offering one-to-one engagement with frontline leaders. And it's a special space
Mhm.
because you've carved that out. That's not very common. And you're finding organizations who are willing to invest in that one-to-one with their frontline leaders. And that puts them in a very special category as well. When you and I first uh, got reacquainted a few months ago and you explained this to me,
Mhm.
I was and continue to be fascinated by that because you have created, I think, a new segment in leadership engagement, leadership training, leadership coaching, which says new frontline managers are worth the
Mhm.
investment of a one on
Yeah.
one personal trainer. So thank you for being bold enough to say there's a space here for carving it out and for really promoting that in the marketplace and for finding organizations that are willing to invest in their people that way. It's very rarefied air. So good for you.
Oh,
You're
thank you.
welcome. Melissa, tell people how they can get in touch with you and learn more about the work that you're doing.
Sure. So easy enough to connect with me on LinkedIn or to visit me at melissajanis.com.